Hello and welcome to the UpSet podcast. Tonight we are talking about when scandal strikes. Coming up next. Hey, welcome back to the UpSet podcast. We're so happy that you tuned in on this Sunday. And I'm happy to have with me these wonderful people here. Hey, guys.
Whoa.
I'm back.
You're back. Marlita's back. And welcome back, Shauna Kay. You've been with us before. Welcome to the UpSet.
Thank you. It's good to be back.
Yeah, so I'm going to pick up where we were in the green room. I promised everyone last week when we were talking about Gillette that we were going to get a firsthand account from one of our own upsetters. And so, Marlena, we want to hear from you. How was your experience?
Wow. Hello, everyone. Oh, my goodness. And I was glad to be with my Pathfinders. This was my first grand international camporee. I'd never been before, but my Pathfinders had gone many times before from my churches, and I would hear all the stories. And so I wanted to be with them because our former youth director, Pastor Pat Graham, had many of us pastors become master guides. Did you become one?
That's right. GP was too, yeah.
I was a master guide, so I am a master guide now. So I wanted to go and be with them. And this story is very amazing because if you ask some of my other leaders, they're like, I don't know if I ever go again. But I would still go again. But it was a real challenge, and not just for us. You know, it's kind of like you feel like you're the only one going through. Story, and then when we get there and we hear so many campers had great difficulties getting there, flights canceled, and buses breaking down. It was crazy. We had a little bit of that. They said there was a lot of rain coming in, so getting started. The buses were 2 hours late coming. We load up, we get on the road, and then we get to Chicago, and the bus driver said they needed to go to sleep for 8 hours. Like, what?
Somebody's probably like, I can drive, just let me drive.
They dropped us off at a mall, and I said, this is Sunday, the mall closes early. So and they were coming back at 9:30, but then in Chicago, they're an hour behind us, right? So that 8 hours became 9 hours, right?
Oh.
So we're walking the streets. We found a little park kind of diagonally across. And remember, we had children with us.
Yeah.
So we had to keep up with the children and, make sure we were all accounted for and trying to eat and feed, and couldn't go, we had to walk to restaurants to take them to the bathroom because we have no place to stay. And I was like, guys, this is what it feels like to be homeless. We don't have it, right? And so we had fears that they would be late picking us back up, and they were. And so here we are on the street again, waiting for the bus to come. So the bus finally comes, right? And I lied to you not. When we first got on the bus, we got to tell you this part. The upper compartments were not holding tight. So I was like, is this a raggedy bus or what is it? So we had red tape, to hold the tops,
Oh, no.
We're being flim-flam, right? We need some money, people. So when they pick us up again, we get on the road, right? And we're traveling, and then at some point there is a big pop. And we're like, what is that? So the emergency window on the top of the bus had popped off, right? And we're like, what is going on? And so one of the drivers, like the main driver, says, somebody touched the window. We're like, nobody touched that window.
Right.
The bus is just raggedy, right? And so he's trying. So it didn't blow away, thank God, but it blew back, right? So he had to, with the force and pressure, get the window back down. And so he got that down. And after we met up with another bus at some point, I think we met up with that bus at a rest stop. So it was two of us kind of traveling together. And we went to a rest stop. We're now in Wyoming, but not Gillette. And we just stop at the bathroom just to use the bathroom. And when we come out, the bus driver says to me, "You better pray, because if God doesn't answer, we can't get to Gillette." I was like, "What?" So then something is wrong with the brakes or something.
Oh my.
The bus that is with us has to then journey to Gillette. We might have been an hour, hour and a half away. Take them, unload them, come back and get us, right? So we had to unload for that bus.
Goodness.
Reload this bus.
my goodness.
So I'm saying by the time my people get there, we're like, yeah. And so we get there
Wow.
after 11, and everybody's getting young people, everybody's working. My young people, bless their heart, they did work hard, right? So
Real
the
pack.
camp all set up. So I know we went to bed like, oh my goodness, maybe 2 or 3. And I saw my Pathfinder leaders. Amazing. I want to get a shout out to Sister Elaine Williams and Sister Beverly B. Core. And we also had Sister Evelyn Belfont with us, and then my young guy, Khalif Blackwood.
Khalif. All right.
They were staying up all night. And I'm like, I'm sleeping. I gotta go to sleep. On it to make sure everyone was safe. And then the next day was the storm.
Oh wow.
And we lost intense with the storm.
You guys.
We had to reset up again. I was like, Jesus, please, we got together. We had to pray and come together. I had to encourage my people. And then after that, I was like, I'm going out. I'm going to the services, because the services were canceled that night.
The first night,
services were phenomenal.
Yeah, that's always been one of the highlights.
Young people baptized. I mean, that's why the devil was having a heyday. Over 1,000 baptized. The services were good every night. Good preaching from Pastor Chamberlain.
Chandler.
Excellent.
Chandler.
Excellent. And the play of Moses, Believe the Promise. I love that. It was excellent. I mean, with all the bad stuff, I was still glad to be there. The services just kind of counteracted that. But if you didn't go to the services, all you see were the
devastation.
And then so they thought the storm coming in Sabbath was going to be the worst than the one Tuesday. So I didn't get that Sabbath experience, But when I did get to the place and I saw all of those thousands and thousands of people, it was so amazing. So amazing.
Yes. Well, we're glad you made it back safely. You had more than just an adventure at Gillette. Just getting there seemed like an adventure for you. So.
It was. And many other churches, so I can't.
Yeah, I did hear a few stories.
Yeah, I know Pastor Javon White, his church in New Jersey, they had a special story. And, somebody else broke down on the way, I think, with us out of AEC conference. But it was good. It was good. And the parade was good. I marched with my Pathfinders, and it was nice.
Okay, great. And on Thursday, just a plug, on AC Today Reports, we'll hear the account from Dr. Griffith and Jenny Smallmore, who, so they'll give us a little update too. So check that out as well. But thank you, Marlena. It's good I'm glad you got the experience. If it starts like this, just imagine where it would go for you. As you can see.
And they were saying, why don't you stay in the hotel? I was like, no, I'm gonna stay with my people. In the tent.
And in 2029, Marlena will be in an RV.
At the Bermuda conference. So I'm just saying hello to the people. Hello, Rochelle. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Fernanda. Thank you, Mary, for being here. Pat, we see you watching. TG with the soda. Okay, Wisconsin was a lot of people are saying that. Hashtag live from New York. Welcome. Kevin Jackson, thanks for being here. Good evening to you. Hi, Carmen. Yes, it is good to see her back, right? We're happy to have her back. Yeah, and then
while we're doing these shout outs, I want to know who was tuning in to the Democratic National Convention this week. I mean, revival this week.
Every night.
We heard some good sermons this week.
We did.
No.
I did.
Oh. Well,
man, those Obamas are still on fire, aren't they?
Listen,
Sharp
nice.
people right there.
I literally got emotional when I was like, I didn't realize how much I missed them in that sphere until I was just like, oh, I just missed them. I missed them. And just phenomenal speeches. I mean, in the fact that on Thursday, so many people who spoke referenced Michelle's comments in their own comments was just a testament to even Obama. I mean, even he referenced her who went prior to it. It was just phenomenal. I mean, to me, they're some of the best orators and speakers I have ever heard in the political sphere. It was just so nice. What were some other highlights for you guys aside from?
I think Reverend Warnock was it for me too.
Yes, he was.
Thoroughly enjoyed his presentation. It was,
good.
Yeah.
Well, you know, Oprah Winfrey was good too.
Yeah,
yes, she was.
She did a really good job.
Yeah, I mean, I was impressed.
And what's my guy? What's my other Sharpton? Sharpton did great.
Oh yeah, and then having the
Sharpton.
I just thought they did a great job of the programming, like having the different talking points and the segments that dealt with that particular issue, whether it was gun control, whether it was, and then having those personal stories and those touches I thought were very poignant. I thought it was just very well crafted. I was telling somebody I felt like I was having an experience, like even though it was hours long, I never like got tired. I felt entertained. I felt informed. I felt inspired. I was just like, it's just so much going
Did you
on.
feel a challenge to do something?
Friend Tiff,
yeah,
Jeffries.
Yes, I like Jeffries.
Yes.
I like Jeffries.
I broke up with you, dude.
Yes, that was the best like analogy. I was like, yes, exactly. And we're not going back.
Kamala, man, that is one intelligent woman. I mean,
oh yeah, she held her own. Let me tell you. Yeah, the ratings were through the roof. Yeah, it was
an excellent convention altogether. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I just thought it was very well done. I feel like, regardless of how I felt about the party itself, you just have to give credit where credit is due. I mean, it was just well put together.
The production, the planning, everything.
Yeah.
And it was funny to me because, you saw all these videos coming out, like comparing the two conventions, and it was just on two totally different like spheres, even from the roll call, how the roll call was handled, to just the overall temperament, I think was just so interesting. Yes, I agree. I love the diversity of the speakers. And what was the gentleman who's a Republican? He spoke Thursday night, but he was saying, well, he was not.
The Kissinger?
Is that him?
Not Kissinger. You talking about the other guy?
He's a younger guy. I couldn't catch his name. I didn't remember who he was, but I just thought that was very interesting to hear that perspective. He was the one saying that, talking about decency, like what's we have to vote for what's right. That was him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was just a lot. I think I was just. Yeah, I was mad about that too, Tiffany. When I saw that, that when they were like going after Tim Walz's son, when his dad was speaking, he was like, "That's my son," and they were like,
they will use anything.
I really don't focus on those people. I think Gus Wallace took it for me. I think it was
special, wasn't it? That's my dad.
I know.
I loved it.
He melted my heart when he did that.
Yeah. And some people were saying, that authentic relationship between a father and a son, it can be threatening for others, and so they attack it as opposed to appreciating. Okay, yeah, thank you. Everyone's verifying. You're right, Sean, about Kissinger. So yeah, it was great. I mean, I enjoyed it. I so the debate's coming up next month, right? So
15 weeks.
All right, that should be interesting. So we'll be watching that as well.
Smoke all over him, yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So, oh wow, sorry, 6:15. Where does the time go? Like when you're having fun, there's just so much to talk about. And just want to give a shout out once again to all of our schools. The DJs that are usually born. So that's open last week, and we have a few more opening tomorrow. Pine Forge Academy officially starts tomorrow. I think we have our Hillside Church and our Calvary Church opening tomorrow. So just giving a shout out to our schools. We hope you're off to a great start. We'll be praying for you. Tiffany calling you out, Marlene. Yeah. Okay. All right, guys. So
Tiff.
I know, no way will out. You said you won't watch it? I just feel like I don't usually like to watch the debates, but
really?
I feel like this one is going.
Her anxiety can't take it.
It's like, for me, it's like watching a close game. You just like feel like you're yelling at the TV and like, hey, what are you talking about?
It's not going to be close.
And that's why I feel comfortable watching, because I feel like she's going to handle business, and therefore there's no need to. Yeah.
The only way they're just going to fight nasty and dirty, but I think her being the prosecutor that she is, she can handle herself.
Oh yes, this is not her first rodeo with dealing with.
I think the matchup between her and Mike Pence for me was actually one, because I think that Mike Pence, he speaks very well. He's an excellent communicator, and I think that really posed a little bit more of a tension for me. But I don't think this one is going to be. Yeah, it's not going to be close either.
Yeah.
Well, and they talk about Trump don't have any policy. I mean, what does he have? The cutting taxes for the rich. He has not said one thing what he's going to do with the economy.
Talk about the border and the border and the border and the border.
Right. That's it. He doesn't have any policy.
Yeah.
So that's the
I do understand that part. Yeah. Well, we're gonna have to do another show just about this whole political atmosphere and how do we navigate it all, because there's just a lot going on. So we have so much more to talk about. But tonight we want to dedicate some time to our topic, which is when scandal strikes. And one of the things we recognize about the church environment, in any sphere, really, where there are wonderful things that happen, where we look forward to the ministry of our churches, where we look forward to the blessings that our churches can provide, it's almost inevitable that at some point, some church within our sphere is going to experience some form of scandal. I mean, we've seen on the TV, even most recently, some like Tony Evans, we've mentioned, so many people were thrown back by hearing of him stepping aside for some sin, as he described it, or was it Robert Morris? Well, something that even happened several years ago that impacted his career in this sphere. So we see that it happens all the time. But the question comes up, what do we do when it happens close to us? How do we react when our own church may come to terms with some form of scandal? Now, we know that there's several different types of scandals and that can come up. And of course, when we think scandal, the first thing we come up with is some type of sexual misconduct. That's like the number one that we expect. But there's so many other types of scandals that can arise. And help me out, guys. What are some of the other scandals that we typically see in the church sphere?
Money.
Embezzlement or redirecting of funds.
All right. Financial misconduct, sexual misconduct.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that can happen is when people in major leadership positions fall away from the doctrines that are held, deeply held by the church.
Right.
If you have a departure from what is considered to be the norm or what is considered to be core values of the church, that person can leave and they will take a lot of people with them too. So that can definitely land into a scandal.
Right. It's almost like you go a little rogue in the pulpit and you're kind of not trying to pull in people. All right. So, we wanted tonight to kind of focus on, a couple of the most common ones that we're familiar with, because, like I said, it's inevitable, but we want to be in a position where when it strikes near us, we know how to properly respond. A lot of times what we do we take to social media, the rumor mill starts to spread. Things are sometimes taken out of context. Sometimes misinformation is spread. And so we're happy to have a resident expert with us this evening, risk manager extraordinaire, who'll be able to, a lot of times when we're talking, we're coming from a place of what we feel might be the best or what we think should work. But Shauna K is here to make sure we understand the proper protocols that need to take place to keep us out of deeper trouble and keep our churches from being liable in areas that we may not have anticipated. So we'll be leaning heavily on her this evening. Okay, so I'm just jumping right into it. First, we talked about sexual misconduct. Let's take that for instance. So let's say there is a person, because there's so many ways that this can come forward. Let's talk about that first of all. There's so many ways that it can surface. We've talked about examples where someone may go to social media and share their experience, and that's how it's found out that something has happened. Sometimes an individual may go directly to the conference, or sometimes the person may go to a church board or, tell a trusted member who reports it somewhere else. However, when it becomes known to the general public or to enough people that this has taken place, Shauna K, what are the first steps that should be taken to address a scandal, especially when it involves the leader? Let's start with the leader of the church, because it could also take place with those within the church as well, members as well.
Yeah, Tasha, when I think about a scandal, to be honest with you, the reason it becomes a scandal is because there's public outrage, right? Most times the wrongful act is committed and it stays secret until a lot of people know about it. And that when it becomes an outright scandal. And I think that the very best thing to do once you have multiple people reporting on it, whether it's hit the news or it goes viral on social media, or even if it's a case where let's say somebody goes on to change.org and sets up a whole petition to say we need to challenge the leadership of this conference or this organization, that's when you know that it has risen to the level of a scandal and can seriously impact the reputation of your organization, whether that be a local church or a religious organization that's providing management services to several churches. Once it gets to that level, there are three things that I recommend that you do. The first one is to acknowledge. We find of recent that there are a lot of people who are in these leadership positions, but they tend to decide that, it's not that big of a deal. I don't need to acknowledge it is to give it life. But once information is widespread, you can't just ignore it.
Right.
That's the first thing that I'll say. So you acknowledge, then you act. You have to take action. If it is a scenario where there is sexual misconduct that is involved, you will likely have to take action. Some actions that you'll have to take includes removing the person from their official role, whatever capacity they're in, so that that person, while they're being investigated, will not be able to continue to inflict harm or continue the immoral acts while they're in that official capacity. And then finally, you have to assure. And the way you assure is by believing the victims who've come forward. If that's a person who came and shared the information, or find a way to assure them that you are going to take action in terms of, one, investigating, but also to ensure that this does not happen again. So those are some of the common steps that you will take, because I know I should have said this further up front, but a church has very little in terms of intangible assets when it comes on to their reputation. It's very, very delicate. And you do not want to get into a situation or a scenario where the only thing that you are remembered for as a church is a scandal.
Right.
Want every time your church name comes up that a person can only point to a scandal that has broken out at your church. And the way to do that is what I call the AAA. You acknowledge, you act, and you assure.
Yeah, that goes a long way. Now, you mentioned the fact, the second one, the act part. I think in times past, people have become frustrated by feeling like the action comes a little too late, or that the person being accused, especially if it's an employee or a respected member of the church or something, a lot of times the protection is given towards that individual. Oh, how could they say that about so-and-so? And because no one wants that person's character to be tainted, they don't necessarily remove the person, because they feel like by removing them, they're admitting that they feel that the person is at fault. And so how do we balance that? Because like you said, we don't know if it's true until an investigation has taken place. How do we balance those optics, or should we even be concerned with those optics?
Well, I think you want to balance it against a backdrop of safety, right? And the very best way to do that is to believe the victims. If this person is being accused of some kind of, I'll give you an example. Adult clergy misconduct is an emerging phenomenon that's coming forward. I know that there's been lots of study that have been done on it. But not enough popularity and notoriety has been given to the subject in and of itself, right? So, for example, this area, this whole field studies the impact of the power imbalance that exists between a pastor and their parishioner. And the many ways you can see how that power dynamic can impact decision-making of parishioners who are being praised or being made praise by these predators, who are pastors, who they position themselves in a state whereby they take advantage of people's vulnerability. If, as a church organization, you have an allegation that is brought and it says that the lead pastor or an associate pastor is engaged in this kind of conduct, if you want to be on the right side of that scandal, the best thing to do is to remove that person from their position. Why? Because you want to err on the side of protecting someone's safety. One of the things that happens whenever we have litigation that's been brought against the church, the way you're evaluated for negligence versus gross negligence, it really comes down to when you become aware of the
what did you do?
What actions did you take? As they watch your footprint and the steps that you took, it's going to be the difference between a $100,000 claim and a $2.5 million claim, essentially.
Right. That's a good point. You almost have to look at it from the, what could be, like it could come down the line. I think sometimes we stay in the here and now and no, it couldn't possibly be. Go ahead, Marlene. I see you about to ask.
Yeah, Shauna Kay, can you expound on what we must do when it comes to the victim? I saw some comments that the victims do not always tell the truth. I mean, I know investigation is very important, but I think we must be careful there, because oftentimes when they're children and we don't take seriously what is done, right, those children are damaged tremendously. I've talked to people at an adult age when they were molested and no one believed them. They believed the adult who said it did not happen. And I know that studies show that it takes a lot to be able to admit that something has happened, right? And then when they do and they're not believed, it really does cause trauma. So can you address that with us? I mean, I know you don't want to falsely accuse anyone, but we don't want to ignore it either, as you stated before.
You are correct. I mean, the truth is we don't necessarily, or most times as a church organization, and from where I sit in the church and I've seen different reports that have come in, I don't think as a church we have the kind of experts and so on to investigate these things thoroughly to know whether the person is lying or not, right? And our duty, even though it may sound simple, it's not simplistic. Once the information is brought to our attention, we have a duty to report this to, especially when it is involving a minor. We have a duty to report this to the investigating authorities. They have all the resources in the world to determine whether this child is lying or not. They will take all of those statements from the child or from other witnesses that they're bringing forward. So if and this is if it's happened recently, because we know of cases where people come forward well after the incident has taken place, but we still want to be the rule of thumb here is to always believe the victims.
Mm-hmm.
And even if the accused is innocent, they will agree with that position, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's best to believe the victims, remove the person who has been accused from their official capacity. In our church and conference, we have the practice of paid administrative leave. If it's an employee, but if it's a voluntary role, it really doesn't matter because you're not getting paid for it, so you're not necessarily losing anything. But we ask that you be removed, not just for the protection of the alleged victim, but also for you as well, because you don't want to have a situation where other victims come forward and start jumping on that bandwagon.
Right.
So the first step is to believe the victims, and then you follow your own internal policies in terms of whatever process you will go through in terms of disciplinary action or how to reinstate that person. If it is that people need to lose credentials, whatever your policy states, you follow that. But we say the first rule of thumb, once someone comes forward with an allegation, believe the victim. If it is a reportable offense, go ahead and have the necessary authorities get involved, conduct their own investigations.
Yeah, I was going to ask that in terms of when we say investigation, are we talking about the church board coming together and calling people, or are we talking about, in certain situations, calling the police and allowing them to conduct the investigation? How do you determine that process?
Well, in our church currently, just to speak to our own policies, and different entities have different policies. We recommend that you have two separate tracks of investigation that takes place, right? You have the internal investigation that complies with your internal policies. And then we talk about the rule of thumb again. It's better to not have a policy in place than to have one that you don't follow.
Well,
right? So if for example, the North America division has a working policy in E87, which outlines in very, very detailed manner the way in which these matters are supposed to be investigated. And at the end of that, there's a conclusion, there's a finding. And as a church, we've always believed in the approach that there is wisdom in a multitude of counselors. So this internal investigation that's been conducted has several internal subject matter experts and individuals who come together. They look at both sides, they look at the evidence that's been brought, and they then make a determination whether or not this person should be reinstated to their role or if other disciplinary action should be taken. So internally, we have a process in place for an investigation to take place through that policy, which we have to follow. But then also, if it is a police matter, we have a duty to either, if it's an adult, which we've done, if it's an adult, we recommend that that adult takes the matter to the police and report it directly. But once it involves a minor, everyone is considered to be a mandatory reporter. You call the relevant agency for your state and have them take up the investigation separately.
Mm-hmm. There was a question in the chat because we were talking about in cases where the investigation takes place and it's found that it was not true. Can the person that was accused sue the organization for removing them or going through that process? That was a question from our chat.
I mean, there's always, this is a very litigious society. You can always bring a case if you meet with an attorney and the attorney finds that damage was done to your reputation as a result of this, and you want to go ahead and take action, you can go ahead and sue. What I am, and Tasha, you and I have sat in different roles where we've dealt with things like these, and it's been my pleasure to work alongside you. But when we're evaluating these matters, we make sure that we definitely stress the importance of, and this is, I think, what you were asking about earlier, how do you balance that transparency with confidentiality, right? Uh, you have to make sure that you walk that very tight rope to protect the privacy of this individual so that this information is not spread throughout the church, causing any kind of defamation or harm to this person while the matter is being investigated. And, one of the things I talk about is sometimes you don't have control over the spreading of that information.
That's what I was going to say.
Right? Sometimes the victims that are involved, they decide that they want to go and share openly about their situation with anybody who cares to listen. The most important thing is that information cannot be linked back to anyone in official capacities, like leadership capacity, myself as a risk manager, the officers, anyone who has been involved in the investigation or who, by virtue of their role, became knowledgeable of the situation. You cannot share anything about this investigation with others that could essentially damage their own reputation. And so if you feel like as part of the investigation process that was done to you and you meet with attorneys, you can prove it, then you definitely would have a case against the church in that case.
Yeah, I could imagine in cases like these where members are pressuring the leadership of the church to give updates and to have church meetings to let us know what's happening.
Right.
Sometimes you have to wait and allow the process to run its course. And it may be longer than just a few months. So it can be awkward sometimes navigating that balance of transparency and confidentiality.
Yeah.
Okay, if I can ask you real quick, have you, it's such a delicate situation, and because you want the victims to feel cared for and assured, as you said, but then to the person who's accused, you want to get them back spiritually, right? Get them back to where they need to be. What's the place of the church as the risk manager? Have you ever had to come in and help the church in this situation? Because this is the thing that can really destroy families in the church. And spiritually, I'm a pastor, always think spiritually, when King David had his fall, right? I mean, that was scandal, killing the husband and taking the wife, that was a scandal, right? And but God didn't remove him because God knew him, right? Even I know today we can't do that, but what's the process with that to restore someone spiritually, but also make the family feel comforted that they're cared for?
I think especially while the investigation is going on, and this is one of the best ways to do this. God gave us the spirit of love that we can extend to everyone, even the person who has fallen, right? And so I do believe that you still will have to be a pastor to that individual. You still will have to pray with that individual. You still will be able to connect with him, check in on or her to see how they're doing throughout this process, because it's not to say that, hey, this person has become an enemy of the church. It's a matter of, hey, there are a lot of competing interests that are here, but I am going to prioritize the interests of the person who's the alleged victim at this time. And it's not to say that you're treating the person any less. You can cater to their needs, but you have to make sure that when you're showing up, that the victim does not feel like they're the ones who are on the second burner when it comes on to taking care and addressing their needs. One of the challenges that we've seen is when the person who is accused, and you always say, hey, I don't care who that person is, if they harm children, this or that.
Right.
But until it happens to somebody that you trust and care for, right? That's where it becomes difficult. And when, as a pastor, you have to find a way to balance that, where this is somebody that I love, I respect, and I trust that is being accused of this. This is where you'll find that it becomes a lot more difficult for you to minister to the victims who's coming to accuse this person that you trust. And so I think that's where the challenge is for us. And what we have to do is to prepare before it happens. You can't prepare when the scandal hits. Right. You have to be proactive about this. Meet with your team. Hey, if something like this should happen at our church, how are we going to deal with it? And have a plan so that when that time comes, you're able to refer to the plan and say, hey, we're just going to follow it to the T, and make sure that is executed with the highest level of fidelity.
Mm-hmm. We're talking, I'm not going to call high level, low level, but we're, right now I think we're dealing with a scenario where it might be a minor or something. What if the scandal is just between members? Maybe there's a rumor that's coming out that is spreading through the church. Oh, so-and-so was with so-and-so. And it's not necessarily a legal issue, but it has a way of dividing the church or causing tension in the church. Because, sometimes when there is like a scandal with members in the church going on, people have expectation that the board should get involved, and then the church starts taking sides. And why is the deacon still here? And all of that kind. What do we do when it's not even really a legal issue, like a legal scandal, but more of like that interpersonal, maybe inappropriate things happening between members, but the whole church is murmuring about it, and so much that it causes division in the congregation.
Yeah, I think that same tightrope applies here with transparency and confidentiality. Okay. Sometimes the church gets up in arms about stuff that is none of their business, really. There are things that you cannot share just by virtue of the fact that, oh, I heard that this happened, right?
Right.
The way I look at a scandal is when there's one deacon that is exhibiting some predatory behavior, and from that behavior, you see where it becomes a safety issue for other people in the church. Now, once that emerges as the issue, then you have to deal with that, because as I mentioned before, you have to prioritize the safety of your members as you think about this. It's not a matter of, oh, the deacon is sleeping with two ladies. They broke up a fight in the churchyard.
Right.
And he's married,
Right. No, but that stuff gets on the news too. We've seen, I'm sure we've all seen some, one of those clips on YouTube, and it goes viral, and the church is now known. Oh, that's the church where those people, beat up the pastor, or there was a fight in the parking lot, so it's like, protecting the reputation from that stuff as well. But I'm sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
I agree. Once it hits the news, or once it becomes news, then you have to do some damage control in terms of speaking to the values that you embrace at that church, and that violence and of any sort is not something that you guys agree with at any level. So those kind of assurances you have to provide to the general public just to do some damage control. But I'm just speaking from a standpoint where you have to be able to distinguish between what is gossip and what is considered to be a scandal that affects the safety and of your church. Yeah.
Okay. All right. There's a question from the chat. What tools does the conference have in terms of training on these particular issues that we're discussing?
I'm glad you asked. Sacred, a church officer's guide to effective risk management. Guys, I wrote a book on this particular subject matter, along with many other issues are touched on. This book was actually sponsored by the Allegheny East Conference and is endorsed by the Allegheny East Conference as a tool that church leaders can read and just at least get a starting point of where do you begin. You get checklists on, here are the things that you need to have in place before the scandal hits. I think I saw somebody mention something earlier, and I think this is one of the more common ones that is affecting a lot of our churches, is a divorce between pastor and his first lady.
Okay, yes.
It may not hit national news, but you may have a scenario where the pastor may have fallen from grace, right? And the spouse knows about it, and it's just making a lot of, causing a lot of uproar within the congregations and so on. And in this kind of scenario, how does a church respond in terms of officially in dealing with this matter. You still have to acknowledge the issue. You cannot go around it. And then you have to take some kind of action. Are you going to ask the pastor to just go on some kind of a leave, or say that your ministry here is now ineffective because we don't see you as someone who will be able to serve? Or is there some kind of restorative action that you can take? Can you send them off on a couple's vacation or some kind of a retreat so that their marriage can be reconciled? Whatever the action is, you should take action, but assure them that you embrace the biblical values relating to marriage, and just embrace the whole matter of love and respect, for people's privacy. Some of those things can come out in the language as you talk about it, but it's very important for your church to be brought into a conversation if it rises to the level of a scandal, and for you to not ignore it, because you will lose people if you try to do it that way.
Right. Or cover it up. So someone asked the question, Rhonda, in larger organizations, what role does public relations play? Do they put out a statement to neutralize the situation?
Yeah. Definitely PR. You call Latasha,
Well, yeah. Get my drafts ready.
The PR function comes under Latasha's office, and so she will be the one preparing those news releases, or if there's need for a press conference or what have you, in terms of your interaction with the media. That's also a very important element in the process of damage control.
Mm-hmm. So are you suggesting that Tasha is Allegheny East Olivia Pope?
She is a fixer. I work along with her.
Right, I was gonna say, I think it's more of a team effort. The fixers. It's a team effort.
All right, Allegheny East, you heard it first. They will handle
legal.
It's handled.
So this is just a process question. Who absorbs the cost when there's a lawsuit, when a leader is involved, such as a pastor?
So from what I've seen, we do have liability insurance that covers the pastors in their official capacities, called employment practices liability insurance. But then we also have what is called MedPay. And this is something I wanted to talk about tonight. All of our churches within Allegheny East Conference have what you call a no-fault MedPay in terms of support for victims of sexual abuse. This coverage will provide funds towards counseling expenses. So if somebody comes forward, they say, this happened to me at the church, and I've been having all kinds of suicidal thoughts or whatever. As a pastor, you can recommend that they get counseling, set up a claim for that, and that is considered to be processed under our no-fault MedPay coverage. And that covers up to $10,000, right? But if you wish to bring claim for damages beyond that $10,000, we have the employment practices liability claim, which does offer a sexual misconduct portion, and then also the pastor themselves would have legal defense coverage through that. We just pray and hope that it never ever gets to the point where claims emerge that are much higher. Because I've seen some things, Tasha.
I'm sure you have.
I've seen some things. But yeah, that's the insurance. We have insurance coverage for that.
Okay. So I know we spent a little time talking about sexual misconduct, but I did want to talk about the other one that we mentioned, financial misconduct or some type of, embezzlement. I mean, unfortunately, we've heard of those stories as well, where, sometimes the church funds have been caught up in various pyramid schemes or other investments. How does the church navigate those? Because a lot of times, those things are discovered, unfortunately, after several thousands of dollars, sometimes has already been, I have to use the word stolen, from the church, and it becomes known. How do we navigate those type of scandals?
Yeah, considering that our churches are largely funded by donations, the very best response to this is to not have it happen at all, right? You know, I think it was, I don't remember the name of the person who said it, but it said that a clear window invites trust, but a foggy one breeds suspicion. And the way to avoid that is to employ the key tenets of transparency as part of your financial management process. You know, I did financial accounts back in college, finance accounting 101. And one of the things they talk about is that reporting is a very important aspect of financial management. It's very important for whoever is handling the funds to have a body that they're reporting the financial health of the church or the ministry to, and that they are engaged in the very best practices, whether that be GAAP, you know, the generally accepted accounting principles, or any other standards, accounting standards that are generally accepted worldwide. It's very important for those to be applied in the management of funds. People want to be able to trust you with their donations. And even though, you know, I know one of the things we talked about in the past, when it comes on to tithe, is that a lot of people will say, hey, at least you're giving your money to God. It doesn't matter if they want to steal it or what have you. I do not buy into that narrative, especially for the younger generation. Do the right thing.
Yeah.
And when it comes on to that piece, it can definitely enhance the level of donations that you receive when people can see what the money is being spent on. They want you to be able to account for every dollar. And so in the way that you report this is very important. But then also, it's also important for you to have independent bodies that are auditing the financial documents that you you have, or reports that you have in place. You know, how does this balance sheet that you are showing me with X amount on the liability section, or the liquid assets, how does that measure up to what is being shown on the bank statements? How can you do that checks and balance to say, this is what you spent and this is what came in? Where's the rest of the money?
Right.
You know, you have to have those elements in place in order to make sure that you prevent any kind of embezzlement or financial mismanagement. But if an allegation is brought, the most important thing, whoever is that person that is in charge of the funds, they should be asked to be placed on some kind of a leave. And an auditor, I know the conference auditor can definitely come in and request access to the documentation to be able to review it. They will definitely consult with the person who was managing the funds, but that person should no longer have the access to be able to take anything more. You want to limit their access as far as that's concerned.
Okay. Now, with you know, the checks and balances and having those things in place, how often should the church or the board be reviewing financial statements, or, you know, because sometimes it you know, it comes about after several months, and it's because no one has really been tracking it or looking at it for some time, until, you know, someone wonders why they can't have a particular day because there's no money, and then people you know, go back and look. So how often do you recommend those things be reviewed?
I'd say at a very minimum monthly, right? You should be having board meetings on a monthly basis. You want to be able to review the checks written report versus the funds received, you know, or the deposit slips report. Just that basic that basic report can tell you a lot, right? You can track the checks by their numbers to see if there's a number missing for this check number. That's one way to track it. There are other situations where there's transactions that take place via credit card. You can look at those expense reports to see what's coming out of the church accounts and so on. So those are things that you can review as part of your monthly board meetings. And then also we recommend that at least once per quarter, you have a finance committee that actually goes in further detail, because most times the board members are not able, they don't have the financial acumen to be able to discern whether something is wrong or not. You want to have another finance committee that's in place as well that also provides a review of the church funds as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's some of my favorite people these days when I'm like in meetings and their financial statements are those who ask questions about like every other line. Sometimes it can be annoying, like, why are they? But for me, I'm like, yes, let's make sure this is right, because, when it's our checkbook and something is awry, we're searching everywhere to figure out where did that $5 go. We should be just as diligent with the funds with the church, because this is ministry. I mean, we need the funds to do ministry. We need the funds to run the church. And so we definitely want to make sure we're being responsible. And I think sometimes we're nervous about doing it because we don't want the treasurer to think that we don't trust them but actually we're doing them a favor, because it's giving them the opportunity to show their accountability for what they're doing, and also prevent some of what you're saying, because they know they're going to be asked about certain things. So when you don't ask, it creates more of a space where people feel like they can, work with autonomy. Okay. So I was going to ask our audience, how many of you have an operating finance committee at your church? So Daphne said that they have one at her church.
Yeah, that's good. Good job.
There's a question here. What about when small group ministries raise funds? Who mentors those funds for monitors probably those funds for transparency? Like people are collecting money, raising money for this project. Some raise money for Gillette. Like, who's making sure that where those dollars go?
Well, Tasha, I think this whole thing centers around a few things. And when you read the book, you'll find that there are several key elements that continues to be repeated across the board. First one is to have a policy in place that addresses those things. And it's a simple policy about the management of funds, right? And that covers everything from loose offering to fundraisers and all of those things. There should be a system in place for if funds are being, because remember now, right? The church is a 501c3 body. Remember this. And we are regulated not just by the general conferences, what they call them, GCAS, auditing services. They have regulatory authority over the churches. But in addition to them, and there are some policies that are outlined in that organization as well, and they've handed them to the local churches. But beyond that, the IRS, when people donate funds to your ministry, they're anticipating that these are considered to be charitable gifts. And if they're not properly recorded and accounted for, it could open the door or a Pandora's box for you to be audited by the IRS. So you don't want to run those risks. So even in a small group setting, you still must comply with the church's written policies on the management of funds. Maybe that looks like, okay, we'll collect the funds, but this person is responsible for taking it to that person. They should not keep the funds at home. Be taken for every funds received. A receipt should be written up so that that person, know how much that person gave, and you can keep track of the funds, right? And all of those things play into the whole matter of compliance. Am I just going off on my own and doing things rogue? You don't want to run that risk, because at the end of the day, if you're accused of stealing the funds, you want to have a way to demonstrate that, listen, this is what I received and this is what I gave you. So that's a very important question, and I'm happy that that was raised. Just make sure you know the policies regarding the management of funds, whether it be through fundraisers or a loose offering or whichever way, that you're complying with that policy, so that it's traceable.
Okay. All right. So we have a comment in the chat. Rosalie Van Putten says, this discussion sounds like it's for a medium to large house church who have very learned persons who, kind of understand these types of things. So how do you manage when the boards are not as learned and they have no idea how to read a treasurer's report? That, it's not that they're not engaged, they just don't know what they're looking at. How do we help prevent these churches from falling into scandal?
Yeah, I see that being helped with education and awareness, right? You send people to do trainings. The conference, for example, Allegheny East, they do like 2 to 3 treasury trainings per month. And then they also have different trainings for the board itself. I know Timothy Privet, he does a really good presentation on how to evaluate financial reports. And he goes through what are some of the things that you have to look at in order to test the financial health of your church. So I do believe that whether you are in a small church setting or a large church setting, you have a duty to educate yourself on what are the best practices in terms of what to look for. And then you could also read my book, Protecting the Sacred. It could help you as well.
Protecting the Sacred. I love it. Okay, so before we go, because we're already at GP, you had a question?
I have one simple question. So let's say as a pastor, I have a mechanic in my church, example, who has fixed 10 members' cars, but did shoddy work and got his money. And the members come to me as a pastor to mediate. How do I know when to outsource and when to handle it myself with the AAAs?
I love it. That's an excellent question. You know, once it's affecting, once you see a pattern, right? That is, and it's among your members, then it's very easy to assume in that situation and scenario, Pastor GP, that look, this person is preying on my members, right? And so that now becomes a thing for you to pull everyone to the carpet and say, hey, or pull that person in and say, hey, these are the reports that have been coming in. Now you try to address that on a one-on-one basis based on the Matthew 18 model. And if you find that there's repentance in terms of him saying, hey, okay, I will give these people back their refund or whatever way they're trying to fix it, you can work with them to do that, to make sure that those relationships are restored. But if you see that it's a scenario where this person is consistently or they're persistent in the behavior, you have a duty to inform your congregation about this and that they should be aware. And this is after you would have warned the person to stop. Now you are in a position ethically where you can go to the congregation and say, hey, be mindful of this. If you are going to be doing business with this person, please note that all of these, we've had several incidents where people have been shortchanged on a deal with this individual. So I do think that there is a space there once you see that there's a pattern of behavior where someone is preying on your church. And it doesn't have to be with a job. It could be a situation where there's a pyramid scheme that's happening or a Ponzi scheme, whatever it is. You have a duty once they're accessing the members because they're coming to your church. You have a duty to sort of just open that box and just reveal what's going on inside.
Thank you.
Yeah, great question. Great question. So I know we have to close, and I wanted to kind of revisit as at the end here, rebuilding the reputation. I mean, obviously, you know, scandals can be inevitable. I think some of us have mentioned that our churches have experienced some of them, and some are still trying to rebuild their reputation or kind of get that stain off of the church's name. So, what do you recommend as some steps that churches can take to start restoring relationships within the church and the outside community after a scandal?
Yeah, and I think, you know, the steps that you take while the scandal is ongoing is going to be important in restoring trust in your leadership as a church, right? I say to my pastors, if you have a Google page that's set up with your church on there, go on there and see what people are saying about you. How are they rating your church? And how are you viewed widely in the public? You have to engage the services of experts. Sometimes there are public relations experts who are just waiting on that phone call to say, here are some things that you can do to address the perception of your church in the community. You want to be able to do that. So you definitely have to call on the Calvary, you know, your PR people, your legal experts, and get them to sit at a table and give you some directions on where do I go from here. We know that pastors, they went to church and they study about Hebrew, Greek, and all of these things. A lot of them don't necessarily have the skills and the training in terms of how to deal with crisis communication or just the whole matter of how to leverage their brand equity in addressing a scandal. So get the experts to come in and help you to do that. The other thing is to recognize too that especially when it comes on to the sexual allegations and so on, you don't want to come off as brute force, but you have to remember that privacy is also very important, right? We talked about that earlier, where some of the victims involved, you don't need to share information about the victim. Sometimes people want to go on and live normal lives. So you try to make sure that the individuals who are involved, they're protected through the process in terms of their privacy. Just remember that healing begins with understanding and not judgment, right? And once you're able to do that, you can move forward. Then the other thing that we talk about in terms of pastoral care, you have to be able to minister to the needs of both the accused and those who are the accusers in a very balanced way. And finally, I just want to say, pray and ask God for the divine wisdom on how to effectively navigate the scandal, so that when people look back at the scandal, they're not necessarily seeing the gunk and the nasty side of the scandal, but they're seeing how you resiliently bounce back from it by being a friend and an ally to those individuals who were hurt in the situation, and then showing that love in terms of restoring them back to a state of wholeness. And, I've heard some PR people say you never waste a good scandal. If and when the time is right and you're able to share the story with the permission of those individuals, you'll be able to restore the image of your church.
I love that. I love that restoration piece. I think sometimes we don't always, we like the act part in terms of removing the person and, getting rid of the bad seed and we feel like we've done our jobs, but it's like, to me, the job isn't complete until, of course, the person, if they're not acknowledging what they've done or they're not repentant, that's a whole nother scenario. But in terms of still reaching out to the accused and, enveloping them with love, letting them know that the church has not forgotten them, or, I think that's a piece. That's, to me, that's where our real Christianity shows, because, even though a wrong has been done to the church, to me, that says to the community, even when people do wrong, we still love them. And who wouldn't want to, attend a church, like that? Even you follow the proper steps, the person went through the proper disciplinary action or whatnot, but love was still present. To me, that is the biggest testimony, I think.
And also, Tasha, I want to add the healing of the church, because both parties are within the church.
Right.
And so we're all connected as a family, even if it's a large church. And so there is, harm that comes to the whole congregation. And so that healing has to take place, and the teaching of restoration, because the main point is to bring all parties back together spiritually, so that we're right. Before God.
Yeah. That actually models how we should be dealing with people in general. You know what I mean? Like, it's not, I think when the church takes the lead in handling these situations that way, it allows people to see, even in my own interpersonal relationships with people, even though sometimes it may be necessary to separate from individuals, there is still some part of reconciliation that could be possible, or there's still some desire to see that person who has wronged us make that turn and head in the right direction. And I think that's always the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I love it. I just want to say that the act of restoration, the process, because they are God's child, it's how we protect the sacred.
How? Right. Protecting the sacred. I love that. All right. So we mentioned this wonderful resource, Shauna K, that you have written, Protecting the Sacred. We can put the information in the chat on YouTube and Facebook for those who may be interested in, just reading a little bit more about it. I think the goal is to not wait for the scandal to hit your church before you're trying to figure out what to do, but just be prepared. One, to prevent. There are things you can do to prevent this from happening. But should it happen, you have some tools, and also to navigate it. So I think this is a great resource for people to utilize, particularly in these sacred spaces. So, well, first of all, thank you for writing the book, and I'm glad that AAC has this as a resource that we can share with others. So, I appreciate that, and thanks for your expertise this evening. Thank you to our chat. All right, thank you.
So we can drop the link to the book in our YouTube and Facebook, right, Latasha?
I think so. I'm trying to do that now. I don't know if it pops up properly, but hopefully it does, and you guys can check that out.
Is it on Amazon? Is it being sold by Amazon? All
Yeah.
right.
Yeah, that's easy way too.
So if you have Amazon Prime, it's gonna get there tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yep.
Help protecting your church by the week. And we didn't get to talk about it, but I know we didn't mention like our safety officers, because I know our churches are supposed to have. I was going to take a little impromptu poll to see how many of our members have the safety officer in your church. Are they operational? Okay. Well. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, and safety is not just about the fire alarm. There's a whole lot more behind that.
Talk about
Thank you, Pastor. Thank you so much for saying that. That's so true.
We may have to have a whole nother show just on that.
Yeah.
Guys, we gotta protect the actual building,
the and the
physical and the physical.
Yes. Yes.
Love that. All right, guys. Once again, thanks for the conversation. Thank you, Shauna K, for being with us this evening.
Yes, thank you for sharing your expertise.
Absolute pleasure to be here with you guys.
Needed you tonight. Excellent.
Conversation. Thank you.
All right, guys, we'll see everyone else back here next Sunday, same time, same place. They got me saying it again, Marlena, because if it's Sunday.
Oh, they wanted it back. Okay.
I don't know if they wanted it back, but one person did at least. So I said it. But thanks, guys. Have a great week. We'll see you next week.
Bye, guys.
Take care.
Bye-bye.